Hey everyone, welcome to episode 10. I'm really excited about this episode. Well, I'm really excited about all the episodes, but this one is another midweek special, and this week's midweek special is on the Army promotion system and how I navigated it. Now, if you receive my weekly newsletter, you know that my midweek special shows are on current events or particular topics that I want to discuss, or topics that listeners want to know about and want me to do a show on. And my Sunday normal broadcast shows are about my Army career and kind of my chronological order, which we've been covering and going through the first 9 episodes. So this week's episode on the Army promotion system comes from a listener. So thanks, Ryan, for the idea. And he wanted to know about the Army promotion system and how do we get promoted. And it's a great question because in my last episode, I talked about my platoon sergeant saying, if you don't have a military driver's license, you're not going to the promotion board. Well, what does that have to do with getting promoted in the Army? And obviously people who haven't been in the Army have no idea how we get promoted anyway. So great question. What does that have to do with us getting promoted in the Army? Well, I'm going to tell you. So there are some differences between, the promotion system, the enlisted promotion system when I first came in and now. And I mean, you have to remember that was 2003, 4, 5, 6, my early days in the Army. There's not a lot of major differences. There's just some small differences, but we're going to cover it generally, how it applies to both areas, but specifically how it applied to me back then. And I'll kind of tie it into now too, because it's not too much difference, just a few small areas. So the first thing I want to discuss though is the enlisted pay grades versus rank and how we discussed in the Army. And on the civilian side, you may hear us talk about an E1, an E2, E3. So that's your enlisted pay grade. So that's what you're getting paid. That's not necessarily your rank. Most of the time, we address people as their rank and last name. So, for example, an E1 is a private, PVT. So those are the initials for it. So private and Miller. So we would say Private Miller. Now, to be honest, most people, if you are an E4 or below, they just call you by your last name. They don't address you by rank. When you become a sergeant, which is an E5, they will, address you by your rank and your last name. So if you're not familiar with all the enlisted ranks, there's 9, and there's E1 through 9. So E1 is a private, E2 is private second class, E3 is private first class, and often we'll just say private. Hey, private for any of those ranks. E4 is a specialist or a corporal. So corporal has a little bit more leadership responsibilities, stuff like that, but they don't get paid anymore. And that's kind of a key to it. So you can be an E4 and a specialist or a corporal. So depending on the situation. E5 is a sergeant. So that's now you're a non-commissioned officer. And E6 is a staff sergeant. E7 is sergeant first class. E8 is a master sergeant or a first sergeant, similar to E4, how it has 2. So E8, same thing, no pay difference, but a first sergeant is the highest enlisted rank in a company. So, and the difference in their rank is you'll see they have a diamond on their chest, so they have a diamond in the middle of their rank. So that's a first sergeant. And then a master sergeant has the same rank as a first sergeant with just no diamond in it, but they don't get paid. I mean, they get paid the same. And then E9 also has 2 ranks. It has sergeant major and has command sergeant major, and it's the same thing as the master sergeant and first sergeant. So they one is in a leadership position, the command sergeant major, and then the sergeant major is in an operations type staff position. So that's the breakdown of the pay grade versus the rank. And, when we, so I am an E8, I am a master sergeant, not currently a first sergeant. So I was a first sergeant a few years ago. Some of y'all may remember or know me prior to that. So when I was in Alpha Company 3-1, the Black Cats. So with all that being said, so now you kind of get a little bit of a feel of the enlisted rank and pay structure. So again, the pay grade, is what you get paid, E1, 2, 3, 4. And so how do we get promoted? So, does everybody come in as an E1 and then work their way up? And well, not everybody does come in as an E1. So you can come in the Army at anywhere from E1 to E4 on the enlisted scale. And most of that is either college education. If you have an associate's degree, you can come in as an E3, so a PFC. So you start making a little bit more money than, other people. Then if you have a bachelor's degree like I did when I came in, which is why I came in as a specialist in E4. So yeah, you can come in as an E4 and be a specialist. And obviously, making a little bit more money at that point. And then you do have some other advantages as far as being eligible for promotions a little bit earlier and stuff. So there is some advantages to that. But for the rest, if you come in just as an E1, you can also take some physical training tests before you come in with the recruiters, and sometimes earn enough points to come in as an E2 or maybe even an E3. I'm not exactly sure on that one. But so from E1 to E4 though, it's mostly automatic. So what do I mean by automatic is you've got to meet time and grade, time and service. So how long have you been in that particular pay grade, so E1, and then how long have you been in the service as an E1? So, and then same thing as E2, E3. So to summarize all of that, without giving you all the details of E1, 2, 3, you should make E4 specialist by 24 months in the Army. So in 2 years, if you came in as an E1, you should be an E4. And even if you came in as an E2 and an E3, by 24 months, you should be promoted to specialist. And it should be automatic. Generally speaking, as long as you haven't been in any trouble, you don't have anything, in your record, stuff like that. So generally speaking, at 24 months, you're going to be promoted automatically. And that would be a specialist, not a corporal. So the corporal is just something else. We won't really cover much of that today. But so as a specialist, there you go. So how much does a specialist make? Well, I went and looked it up the other day, and for this show, and a specialist makes $24.49.80. So a specialist in E4 with 2 years in makes $24.50 a month. Let's just say a month. Now, on the surface, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you're single, you live in the barracks, so you pay no rent, no utilities. What you do pay for is your cable, your internet, your cell phone bill, if you have a car, insurance, gas, that kind of stuff. But other than that, you don't have rent or a mortgage, and you also get to eat in the chow hall for free. Now, may not always be the best food, all right, but you can eat in the chow hall for free. It comes with you being a single soldier, and you get a meal card, so you're allowed to eat in there for free. But again, it's not great. A lot of soldiers still use their own money to buy food and have in the barracks and stuff like that. And there's some other challenges to go along with that, which I am going to address in my next special episode next week, talking about barracks and the situation in the barracks in the Army. So, but yeah, $24.50 essentially is what they make a month as an E4, and then in 2 years. So, really, not bad. And when you think about what the Army has done for this individual as far as training them, giving them a skill, they're working in that field, depending on what job you picked or you were picked for, that's probably pretty decent money. So some people will say that the E4 is the specialist is the best rank in the Army, and they call it the sham shield. So why do they call it the sham shield? Well, so you've been in long enough. We talked about that. So you've been in 24 months. So you've been around the Army a little bit more, and you have no official responsibility. So you're not an NCO, non-commissioned officer, where you are in charge of soldiers and you're in charge of, maintenance activities, or, the stack up on a house that you're getting ready to go into. Typically there's NCOs in charge, right? So you don't have any responsibility. If anything goes wrong, it's not on you. If something doesn't get finished on time, it's not on you. And the other thing that those specialists know about the Army is, so they know when the NCOs are going to come and ask for volunteers or start picking for details that they need to go do. Details, what does that mean? Well, we do a lot of other things besides our actual job in the Army, and many of us spend most of our time doing those things and not our job, actually. So one of my very early episodes, when I talked about my first 60 days at Fort Hood, and I discussed, that I was mowing grass and I was at the motor pool doing all kinds of things other than my job. So those are some of the things that we have to volunteer for sometimes, or we get picked to go do. We have to go mow the grass, or we have to go dispatch a truck from the motor pool and take that truck and go pick up something from some other unit and bring it over here. Various other things, or we have to go be on guard duty at the gate for a month at a time sometimes. Who knows? Whatever the case is. So those specialists know a lot of times when the NCOs are going to come and ask for those things, and they know either when to volunteer, when not to volunteer, or when not to be around so they don't get picked, because they know that a lot of times the NCO, he just has to have a name at that point. And let's go back to 2002. Not everybody had cell phones. We were all still face-to-face, meeting and stuff like that. So when you had everybody in front of them, you would say, okay, I need a person for this, I need a person for that. And maybe that was the convenient time for the specialist to have to use the bathroom somewhere, or, go out to the smoke area. So a good NCO would go and collect all of his soldiers and make sure they're there before he starts going through everything. But trust me, I've seen it happen so many times, and those specialists just know how to get rid of all that. And then you've got the poor privates like looking around like, well, where did everybody go? Like, well, I don't really want to do that, but I guess. And so here's the poor private now going to do the detail or whatever was selected. So those specialists, so a lot of people say, man, it's like the greatest rank. I don't have any responsibility, but I know enough that I can get away with stuff. And then if I'm skilled enough in my job, I get selected to go do that job. And I'll tell you, in aviation, that happens a lot. You've got a specialist so-and-so that's great at working on the helicopters. Guess what? That soldier is going to be working on the helicopters every time that you get an assignment to work on them. That soldier is not going to be mowing grass. They're not going to be doing anything else. They're going to be working on the helicopter. So some of them know that too, and they're like, I'm going to make sure I'm good at that, so that I'm doing that and not doing those other things that aren't as fun. So little background on the specialist. So now that we're a specialist and we're an E4, and well, now what? Now what do we do? How do we get promoted? So step one is we've got to meet that time and grade, so the pay grade and the time and service minimum. So in this case, we'll talk about, going from a specialist to a sergeant. So now we're going from E4 to E5. So naturally, you would think that there would be some more requirements than just meeting time and service, time and grade, because you're getting ready to assume a lot more responsibility. Remember that specialist, that E4, he doesn't have any responsibility. Well, the sergeant, the buck stops there. So when everything rolls downhill, the buck stops right there. So that sergeant, he takes full responsibility. He or she takes full responsibility of all the actions and the outcomes, if it comes down that low. So there are some other steps that we've got to take to earn that promotion. So the first one is meeting that time and grade, time and service, which is 36 months, 3 years. So you have to be in the Army 3 years to be recommended for promotion. Now, I'll also say these are general standard timelines. There are waivers, meaning you can get recommended earlier than that, but I'm just speaking in general terms, just for everybody's benefit that doesn't understand or doesn't know, hasn't served in the Army. So 36 months is the general timeline. And so 36 months, 3 years, you can be a recommended for promotion to sergeant. And if you meet all the other criteria, boom, I mean, you literally could be a sergeant at 37 months. Now, let's put that in perspective before I move on to the other steps. Let's think about, so the Army structures so many of their regulations and policies based on the infantry manning and structure of how their platoons, companies, their squads, platoons, companies are set up. So at 36 months, and I'll describe how an infantry platoon is normally set up. So you've got a sergeant, that E5, that is in charge of 4 soldiers. So that's one team, that's an A team. You've got another sergeant that's in charge of another 4 soldiers, and that's a B team. Then you've got a staff sergeant, that E6, that is that squad leader that's in charge of both of those teams. So then you have 4 of those, really three line. The 4th one is a weapons squad. And I don't know exactly how they set that up. I think it's the same setup. But then your platoon sergeant is your E7, your sergeant first class, who is in charge of all that. So if a young soldier comes in, a young person comes in the Army at 18 years old, 19, even 20, and they are doing, their job and learning everything, and they meet the minimum requirements, and they end up going through the rest of the steps that I'm going to describe and become that sergeant at 36 months. So at 21 years old, these sergeants are responsible for the welfare of these 4 soldiers and their families and the accomplishment of the mission. So this comes down to, when you look at the infantry side, I mean, they do a whole lot, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it, as an aviation guy, but they, that sergeant is going to be leading soldiers into, urban areas, make decisions on what people are supposed to do, how to execute the mission, whether people are pulling the trigger or not. And then those junior soldiers have got to decide whether they're pulling the trigger or not in that particular case. There is a lot of responsibility, placed on those young people. So I do not like this term when somebody refers to a sergeant and E5 as, oh, he's just a sergeant. No, there is no such thing as just a sergeant in the Army. They have incredible responsibility and do some amazing and incredible things. And when we look at Army aviation, those sergeants are running maintenance teams. A lot of times they are out on their own, alone and unafraid, meaning they are with their team doing maintenance operations at a undisclosed location that's away from everyone else. They don't have that staff sergeant with them. They don't have that sergeant first class with them to help them, and they're preparing, fixing helicopters, they're crewing helicopters, they're maintaining them, they're doing all kinds of things. So there's a lot of responsibility on these young NCOs in today's Army, and they are not just a sergeant. I mean, it is a big deal when they become an NCO and when they move up through the ranks, that way. A lot of people, I'll tell you, you'll hear it, oh, he's just a sergeant. No, that's wrong. Okay, that is absolutely wrong. So moving on to step 2. So how do we meet the minimum requirements? Well, what's next? So what comes next is you are recommended for promotion, based on recommended from your squad leader to your platoon sergeant, and then the first sergeant, all of it goes up, and then the first sergeant makes the recommendation to the sergeant major, the command sergeant major of the battalion, and that this soldier has shown the potential to assume greater responsibility based on his performance. So, and we talk about that in the Army, how we promote based on potential. So but you've got to perform to show that you have the potential for greater responsibility. Now, I'll tell you, a lot of times in the Army, we are often already in positions of greater responsibility, meaning we're a sergeant, we're an E5, and we're in a E6 staff sergeant position for many months, sometimes years, and same thing on the way up. until the promotion system kind of catches up to us and we hopefully get recognized for working above our pay grade is what we talk about it. So we've got to be recommended. So at 36 months, when we talk about, earlier I said I'll talk about what kind of happened then and what happens now. So at 36 months, you are in what's called the primary zone. So you should be going to the promotion board if you've met the time and grade, time and service requirements. So if you are not going to the promotion board at that time, then your leader, your squad leader, so should be your team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant, they should all be involved in the counseling, a formal written document saying, we are not recommending you to the promotion board at this time because of, and list the reasons why, so that you can fix them. Now, really, there's a lot of other things that need to happen before that too, because it shouldn't happen at the 36-month mark. Look, at the 36-month mark, you should know whether you're being recommended to the promotion board or not. It's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret. You should know the rules of the game. The leaders know the rules of the game, and they should have already been, developing you, mentoring, leading, coaching, the young soldier as they have come up. So they should have been preparing you, especially if they've noticed that you have the potential. You recognize, leaders know if somebody has the potential prior to 36 months. They don't just wake up on the 36-month mark and go, oh, this soldier has the potential to be promoted. You're going to the board. We're recommending you to the promotion board. No. But I'm here to tell you that that's not how it happens all the time. I understand that. And especially when I was young in the Army, it definitely did not happen that way. I had to find out the rules of the game. So I had to ask. And of course, they're in the regulations. But, I heard the story way back then. The best place to hide something from a non-commissioned officer is to put it in a book. Now, that's terrible. I'm a non-commissioned officer. But in my experience and in my time, I have seen a lot of people and a lot of non-commissioned officers do things that maybe weren't within the regulations or the field manuals, or didn't know what the correct answer was and didn't know what to do even though it was in writing. And so a lot of officers will use that when we don't know things and they have to maybe do our job for us, which they shouldn't have to do. So back then in 2003-ish, I don't remember that ever happening with a lot of our soldiers. And, one, being even mentored and coached, prepared for promotion or anything like that. So for me, it was like, hey, what do I need to do to get promoted? Like, what are the rules of the game, and how do we do this? And I'll tell you, look, for me, I wasn't a great mechanic. I mean, in my early days, I was in a support battalion. So I was, doing what we called phases. So they're long-term maintenance on aircraft. We have the aircraft for 2 to 3 weeks, and we, are remodeling, not remodeling, but going over and cleaning and inspecting all kinds of components on the entire aircraft and replacing bad ones and fixing stuff that we can fix. So anyway, there's a lot of that. So I was in there for 3 years in that kind of unit. And look, I'm not saying I was bad, but I wasn't the greatest at it. Okay. And on top of it, I didn't like it. I mean, I didn't like being a mechanic. I chose this job because I wanted to be a crew chief, meaning I wanted to fly with the aircraft and be that crew chief. And thankfully, I got an opportunity to do that in my, next unit. But so the first few years, I was like, man, I don't want to, I don't want to do this for the rest of my time in the Army. And when you come in Army Aviation, here's another thing. So when you come in Army Aviation, you get a 6-year contract. Now, there are small stories out there where you can get a shorter one, but most of the time, because it costs so much money to train us and we're so skilled in aviation, that the Army makes us sign up for 6 years. Now, think about, we're talking about promotions, and at 36 months, the Army said you should be ready for a promotion. So that's only halfway through our contract. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people in aviation that they don't want to get promoted. They just want to work on aircraft, and they are good at it. They are great at working on the aircraft. That's what I want them to do. But the Army says, because the Army doesn't make exceptions to any branch within the Army, that 36 months, you're ready for promotion. You should be ready, so you need to go to the board. So when I was coming up young in the Army, you could just say, I don't want to go. I decline to go to the board. there were lots of people that I knew and served with that left the Army at the end of their 6-year contract as a specialist, as an E4. So for 3 years, from 36 to 72 months, I mean, they were, should have been in the window for promotion, and they just said, no, I don't want to go, I don't want to do it, and the Army allowed it. We were in combat and we needed everybody to work and do their job. So it was kind of a thing back then. Now, as I became a little bit more, my staff sergeant first class and master sergeant and first sergeant days, and progressed through the Army, the Army changed its philosophy and said, we're not going to allow you to just do that. You've got to either progress or get out. And I'm not sure that I'd really agree with that on the aviation side. So if we go back to the Vietnam era, where we used to have what called spec ranks. So we had, spec 4, 5, 6, 7, where they were not a leader of soldiers, but they were technical experts at their job. So there were awesome maintainers, logisticians, whatever the case was. But you could still get promoted and make more money and stay in the Army and do a great job, but you're just not going to be that non-commissioned officer and be in charge of training and all the soldier stuff. Well, we don't have that anymore. That left in the 70s, and when the Army said everybody's going to be a leader. So, now there's that pressure of, in Army aviation to, if you're going to stay in and do your whole 6 years, you've pretty much have got to get promoted at some point, or you're going to be out of the Army if the leaders in the unit do what the regulation says. And essentially, like, look, you're not going to be given the boot at 36 months if you don't get promoted. I mean, there's timelines for being counseled and told that, hey, you're not going to the promotion board because you need to fix yourself, and if you say you don't want to go, then you only have a certain amount of time. You can say that too. So there's timelines that come up that say, hey, at some point you're either going to go to the board and earn your promotion status, or you're not. So now it's a little bit more challenging for some of those soldiers that really want to work on the aircraft and just be technical people. But back when I was coming in 03, 4, 5 in those early days, now people would just say, I don't want to go, so they wouldn't go. But now you really can't do that. So, but again, I wanted to get promoted. Okay, so I wanted to get promoted. I didn't really want to be this mechanic anymore. So I wanted to be that sergeant that was in charge of the mechanics, developing the phase plan, helping all the different parts and people that need to come together to work to make it better, to finish the job. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And of course I wanted to go be a crew chief eventually too. So I asked, what are the rules of the game? What do I need to do? Which really ties back to my last episode, and where I was talking about, when the platoon sergeant said, hey, if you don't have your military driver's license, you're not going to the promotion board. So that's when I, made the call and got in that class. And for 2 weeks, I learned how to drive Army vehicles, and then got my driver's license. So I was like, man, that's what I want to do. If he said that's one of the rules of the game, then that's one of the rules of the game. Now, there's nowhere in the regulation that says you have to have a military driver's license to be promoted. But going back to that potential thing, if your leaders need you to perform in certain ways and perform certain tasks to, one, be a big part of the team or be a viable part of the team, then that's how they can show that you have potential to take on greater responsibility versus the other person that, I'm not getting a driver's license, because they see that person with a driver's license gets tasked out all the time to go drive these trucks and do all these other jobs. Well, they have to be done by somebody. So that's where it doesn't say you have to have a license, but your leaders can say, again, your performance shows you have the potential, or your performance shows you do not have the potential for greater responsibility. So that's kind of how it ties into getting that military driver's license. Now, when I was a senior leader, sergeant first class, and even, first sergeant with my soldiers, so there's opportunities to go to the promotion board earlier than the time and grade, time and service, we call them waivers, or secondary zone. And hey, if you want to go during those those times, I'm all about it. But these are some of the things that you need to do to prove that you have that potential for greater responsibility. And one of them was go get your military driver's license and, do X number of military training school certificates and go to certain schools and stand out from your peers, basically, right? So if you do these things, hey, here are the rules. I'm telling you what the rules are. Boom, go execute them. And then, hey, you know what? I mean, we'll probably recommend you to the promotion board. So, but it wasn't always quite like that back then. So I've met all the minimum time and grade, time and service requirements. I'm a specialist. I'm an E4. And now my leadership says I have shown the potential for greater responsibility, and I recommend you for the promotion board. Now what? Well, in the Army, we don't take a test like the Navy and the Air Force does. So they take a test of their job skills. So in the Army, we don't do that. Like I don't take a test on, my aviation knowledge and skills, and do I have the knowledge to be that next, pay grade or rank? We don't do that. So we go in front of a promotion board, which is made up of first sergeants, those E8s in the battalion, so all the E8s of the companies, and then the command sergeant major of the battalion. We go and stand in front of them and sit, and we essentially answer a whole bunch of questions. Okay, now questions can be different, and so you might think, well, that's kind of a test. Well, sort of, but it's not a objective test over here that you take just on your MOS. So these are leadership questions. These are very few job MOS questions, but they're a whole bunch of regulation and field manual questions and leadership type stuff, right? So prior to, you want to study, again, knowing that you're eligible and you are probably going to be recommended to the board. So you start studying and learning the regulations and the FMs and all these questions and stuff. And then plus you've got to memorize the non-commissioned officer's creed, which is long. I'm going to tell you it's long. You've got to memorize this. And, so when it's time for the board, so they have a promotion board once a month at your unit, and you go, and if you're at home, like in garrison, meaning you're at your home station in the United States, you wear your dress uniform. So you wear your dress uniform and you come in there and you feel you're intimidated, all these first sergeants and sergeant major, you've got to say the NCO creed loud and proud, and hopefully you don't miss a word. And then you march in front of them back and forth. They watch you, look at you marching. They look at your uniforms. They look at your personnel records to see what awards you have and to make sure your awards on there match your uniform. Because if you can't be right, how are you going to make sure your soldiers are right? Right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. So, but that's part of the theory behind all that. So you say the NCO creed and you answer the questions, and they look at how you're sitting, and they look at, like, if you don't know the answers, how do you know, like, how did you answer that? Did you duck your head? Man, first sergeant, I don't know, man, or did you give the right answer? So they grade you on all that stuff, and they come up with a score. So back then, when I went in 2003, they had points. That board right there had points that they gave up to a maximum of 150. You had to have 135 to be considered promotable, and a maximum of 150. So those people right there scored me on how many points I got from my promotion board. Now think about that. I'm being graded by these first sergeants. Everyone else in the Army is doing the same thing somewhere else with a different criteria, maybe. Maybe they're counting the questions. Maybe they're not. Maybe they like the person. Maybe they don't. So it's pretty random what your score is going to be sometimes. And the score matters because the promotion ends up happening depending on how many points you have total after the board. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. So now the promotion board, when soldiers go, it's a go or no go. So they either are recommended for promotion or they're not. So those first sergeants and sergeant major have no control over how many points they get. There are no points for the promotion board anymore. So that has changed. But then, there was a lot of pressure on, I need to do well because I need as many points as I can get. So points, what does points mean? So I'm done with the board. I passed. I'm recommended for promotion. Woo! I'm going to be a sergeant tomorrow, right? No, no, not quite. So talking about points, so the Army promotes on that 800 points, total of 800 points. Well, how do you get 800 points? And again, the promotion board was maximum only 150, and I think I got 142 or 143. So the primary ways: your physical training score, so PT, what you get on your PT test, your weapons score, so when you go to qualify on your weapon, you get whatever your score is relates to a certain number of points. Your civilian education, so if you have a bachelor's degree, that's like 100 points. Your professional military education, so you get points for going to, what we call NCO education school, so your NCOES, so you get points for those things. Your military education, so training, so that driving class I went to was points. I went to a first aid class for a week called Combat Lifesaver. We call it Combat Life Taker, but just being silly. But that was worth points. So anything that was like a week long was worth points. So you can do all of these different things to increase your points. Now, so if you max your physical training test, you get the max amount of points in there. I never maxed my PT score. I tried, but I never did. So that was one area I could, improve on. And then weapon score too. So, I did get expert, but I never got 40 out of 40 till later in my career when I didn't need the points anymore. So all kinds of things go into the points. Now, how does the Army determine, where the points at are each month? Essentially, it's kind of a basic human resources thing. You're allowed so many sergeants for this job skill. So I was a Black Hawk mechanic, so my number and code was 15 Tango. So if you're allowed to have that many sergeants in the whole Army at that pay grade and rank, and if they drop below that, then they drop the points to however low it needs to go to pick up that number to hit that, number that they're supposed to have total in the Army. So one month it could be 750 and they picked up one person. The next month they need to pick up 5 and it drops to whatever the number is to pick up that 5, right? So I was promotable from that May of 03 till September of 2004. So I was a specialist promotable. Didn't mean anything really. It just meant that whenever I got enough points, I was going to get promoted. And it really hinged, my biggest thing was one, PT. I didn't have the highest PT score. And then the other thing was military education. I worked a lot in that year or so on getting our correspondence courses, kind of continuing education, stuff like that. So, but it took me a long time. But how I did it again was I found out what the rules of the game were. And then I said, I want to play. And there's so many people that they have no idea. They don't know the rules of the game. A soldier will come to my unit, when I was a first sergeant and he's already a specialist, and he comes and says, well, how do I get promoted? And I'm like, what? You're already a specialist, so you've been in the Army already 24 months most likely, and you don't know how to get promoted? And hey, so I sit him down, grab his platoon sergeant, hey, come in here, let's, go through this. And we talk about a roadmap, right? We developed that roadmap from those junior soldiers all the way, heck, I'll develop it all the way through their sergeant major if they want. I'll show you what you need to do. You need to know the rules of the game, right? It's no secret, but some of them don't want to know, some of them don't care, whatever. Some of them want to know, and then those are the ones that you really latch on to and, help them, earn their promotion and stuff like that. So that is the same process for your sergeant and your staff sergeant board. Okay, so E5 and E6. So you got to do all that. You got to do the whole thing again when you're a staff sergeant. Go to that board and answer all those questions. And now the questions might be a little bit different. They may be more geared towards leadership and what would you do in this situation and stuff like that. But essentially the same process. And then you have to wait on points and try to earn more points, max your points out, so on and so forth. So a little tip too for people that may be watching this, that maybe their children will go into the Army, or maybe young soldier out there watching, or people that are going to join soon. Your job, we call it our MOS, military occupational specialty. You need to pay attention to that long term if you think you want to stay in for a while and not just learn that skill, but you want to do, what's the promotion rate like for those certain jobs? And I'll even look in aviation. When you look at, the Black Hawk mechanics and the Chinook mechanics, and the Apache mechanics, the general mechanic we typically promote a lot better than the specialty, what we call our shops guys. So our engine, airframe, hydraulics guys, because they're so specialized that we don't have a lot of them. So there's less spots for them to get promoted to. So, I mean, their promotion tree really looks like this. I mean, quickly. Whereas in ours, it's pretty wide, and there's just tons more opportunities. So pay attention to the job and how many opportunities are out there for you. Now, senior NCOs, I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. So when you are ready to be promoted to Sergeant First Class, Master Sergeant, First Sergeant, and Sergeant Major, essentially all your records go into a file, and there's a bunch of Sergeant Majors up at Human Resources once a year or whatever it is, and they look at your records and they score you on your evaluation reports, how you ranked against your peers. They do look at your PT score. They look at your awards. They look at your photo of your uniform to make sure your awards are right on your personnel records and stuff like that. But they basically make assumptions based on your evaluations and your personnel file. And then that's how you get promoted to, Sergeant First Class, Master Sergeant, First Sergeant, all that kind of stuff. So, and it's a lot slower. Now they have just gone through a major change and update in that Army promotion system where they're going to not wait as long to promote people. They're going to they're going to be able to promote people from a list essentially monthly whenever they need it. Now, the other change that they made too is they created the order of merit list based on potential for promotion and not seniority. So when I got promoted to Sergeant First Class and to Master Sergeant, it was like, yes, I made the list, but what number I was in that list was based on seniority and time in service. That was it. So I don't even remember what my numbers were, but I was typically kind of young at the points that I got promoted. So I was a little bit lower. So somebody that had been in 20 years versus me had been in at 14, they had a higher number than I did back then. Now it supposedly goes by who has the most potential and who really is the best NCO. So somebody at 14 years can have a higher sequence number than somebody at 20 years. Now there's some discussion on whether that's really happening still or not. I don't know. I haven't been too involved in that because I am like 71 days in a wake up from retiring. So, but there are some changes, coming there. So really that's it. I mean, that's how you get promoted and in the Army, and that's how I navigated the promotion system. And, when I look back at, going from specialist to sergeant, and then even from sergeant to staff sergeant was really quick for me. And, I made staff sergeant in 4.5 years, E6, which typically your staff sergeants their primary zone is like 84 months. Okay. So, I made it really early. Some people, a lot of my peers definitely was like, oh, he's not ready. I don't know that I was ready either, but I knew the rules of the game. I knew how to play it, and I wanted to go for it. And I knew I could pass the boards and all that kind of stuff. So I went for it and did it. Probably made some mistakes due to lack of experience, but tried my best, obviously. And I did okay. And then it took me a while from staff sergeant to make Sergeant First Class, even though I still got promoted pretty early as a Sergeant First Class. So it all worked out fine. But, again, hey, knowing the rules of the game and, knowing how to play that game. And that's really in any place, anything. And the Army is no different. You just have to sometimes find out what those rules are. So I had a friend of mine that I talked to probably a month or so ago. I served with. He's a veteran. He's out. Been working in the civilian sector for a while. And he's, really awesome operations supervisor, maintenance, all this stuff. Anyway, so he asked his supervisor, hey, how do you get promoted? Supervisor was like, I don't know. And this is a big time company. Okay. Big time company. He's like, I don't know. And so my friend is like, hey, so Give me your hardest thing. Give me what you can't accomplish or that you don't like accomplishing, and let me go after it and get it. He's like, nah, I don't think so. And so it's very strange that even some companies out there, they don't want you to know the rules. And he kind of found out that it's kind of like they walk behind you sometimes and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we want you to get promoted. So I don't know that that's the best way to do things, but it happens out there. And it still kind of sort of happens in the Army when they don't tell you what the rules of the game are. But we do have some things in place to kind of remind the leaders and the soldiers. You get reports from your HR department that says, hey, this soldier needs to be promoted, or we need counseling to say he's not going to the promotion board. So know the rules of the game. Leaders out there understand the rules of the game. Counsel your soldiers, teach them, what the rules of the game are, develop them, help them along the way, develop that roadmap plan, that succession plan we talk about. So, and then, hey, nobody cares about your career as much as you do, right? So, some of y'all are watching because you want to learn how the promotion system works. Some of y'all may be watching because you're soldiers and you're interested. So nobody cares about your career as much as you do. And I'm definitely a big believer in that. Somewhat unfortunately, but you've got to get after it, and you've got to find out, what the rules are and make it happen and do what's best for you. So hopefully you now know and understand how we get promoted in the Army and why I went to that driver's training class to get promoted. So thanks for listening and watching to the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite listening app. Leave comments and questions, and if you have an idea for a show or want me to answer stuff, if it's not long enough for a show, I'll answer directly. I will answer all comments and questions anyway, but if it's not meant for a whole show, I can answer it really quick for you. So stay tuned for the next episode of Miller's Military Moments, titled Saying Goodbye and Hello to Kuwait, and that'll be released this Sunday. So I am Master Sergeant Miller signing off and reminding everyone to enjoy life, help others, and be you.